Welcome to the Couples Expert Podcast with Stuart Fensterheim, LCSW, your source for the latest tips and practical down-to-earth advice on creating emotionally connected, thriving relationships. Now, here's Stuart.
Hi there, and welcome to the Couples Expert Relationship Podcast. This is episode number 10. For those of you who have been listening for a while, if you recall over Valentine's Day, I spoke about the power of the Hold Me Tight workshops that I assisted in San Diego. What I'd like to do for this podcast is share with you all the learning that I've had about Hold Me Tight workshops and the reason that these couple retreats are so impactful with countless couples who have gone through this. The exciting part about this is by purchasing Susan Johnson's Hold Me Tight book, doing the exercises listed in the book, all of you can experience the same kind of transformation in your relationships. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of these workshops all over the United States and all countries throughout the world. I want to share the concepts of the Hold Me Tight workshops, give you as much information as I can to assist you in having the best relationship possible. I think for those of you that know me, know that I do these podcasts because there's nothing more important to me. And I've dedicated both my time and energy and my lifetime to helping couples have the best relationship possible. Before I begin, though, what I want to do is just to make sure and remind everyone that all the show notes for these podcasts, as well as the transcripts, are on my website at www.thecouplesexpertscottsdale.com. I also want to thank all of you, and I'm really deeply honored that as of this recording, I've had over 1,500 downloads of my podcasts. I'm really, truly honored by this. I want to, though, ask you guys a little bit of a favor. One of the things that I set a goal for myself is to try to get listed in the new and noteworthy section of iTunes. The way that that occurs is based on having a number of reviews from my listeners. So if you are inclined, I would really appreciate you going to iTunes when you listen to this podcast and to write a review on my podcast. And what I'm hoping is that by being listed there, the information that I'm wanting to share with those couples that are having relationships that would like some information on improving their connection with one another, the more people will get exposed to this podcast. To talk about something exciting that and a new venture for me is I'm going to, beginning in the month of April, start bringing guests onto my podcast. That's really an exciting thing for me because having others come in who are willing to invest their time and energy in sharing their expertise with all of you is a real goal of mine. And this month, I'll be having Diana Weiss-Wisdom to talk about her experience running the Hold Me Tight workshops in San Diego. As well, in April, I'm going to have Travis Fry, who's a certified EFT therapist and Christian counselor, come on and talk about how Christian counseling is different than some of the other forms of counseling out there. And he and I are going to have a really good time because he's a friend of mine. And in April, with Easter and Passover, he and I are going to talk about how Easter and Passover has lessons to be learned about improving and maintaining healthy relationships for couples. And lastly, I am so excited about this one, which is in April or possibly in May. I'm not quite sure where it's going to fit in. I'm going to have Kim Bowen on. For those of you that don't know, Kim has a really successful practice on couples counseling, and she does something with her couples that are some things that I've actually thought about but haven't quite gotten around to doing, is that added to her services coaching. Coaching is this new up-and-coming model of counseling that people actually get a coach to work with them as a couple or as an individual to help their relationship. And we're going to all learn, and me included, going to all learn about how coaching has helped her practice and helped the clients that come to see her and her associates. So I'm really excited to have Kim on in May. Anyway, back to our podcast for today. After 25 of years of my doing couples therapy and also looking at all the research studies that are out there, one of the things that we know is that the conflicts that couples have are just on the surface. They're surface issues, and that below the surface, there are really lots of feelings and other things happening for individuals and couples that have to do with them feeling emotionally disconnected. People really are watching their backs. They feel criticized. They feel shut out. And one of the saddest things is people feel alone. Underneath all of that surface arguments and surface fighting, people really are asking themselves a particular question. The question that people ask about their partners is, are they there for me? Do my feelings matter to you? And will you respond to me when I need you? The answers to these questions that people have are really hard to ask and so hard to hear in the middle of a fight that makes the difference between people feeling emotionally close to their partner and starved. What that means is when we're fighting with our spouses, and whether we're fighting about money or whether we're fighting about sex or whether we're arguing about parenting our children, what really is going on is what we're asking ourselves is, why do I feel so disconnected from this person, and do I matter to them? And if my needs don't seem to matter or count, are they really there for me? For most of us, the answer to that question is no, they're not. And if that's the case, what kind of relationship do I have? So with some of the research that's come out recently on love and relationships, what we really know now is the emotional responsiveness and how responsive we see our partners is what makes or breaks our relationships. The thing to remember is that even people in positive, happy relationships sometimes argue and quarrel. It's not the quarreling or the fighting that's the problem. It's whether or not we're able to tune back into each other after the argument, after we were done being upset with each other, and is there a reconnection that occurs? What we know is that 7 out of 10 couples who have gone through emotionally focused therapy or the Hold Me Tight workshops absolutely say that they can repair their relationship. And that's really the power of this. The power isn't that, oh, they're going to have this best relationship and no one's going to be upset with each other and they're going to be living some sort of nirvana. But it's that they matter to each other to a degree that we know that even after we get upset with our partners, we're able to come back together, reconnect, and feel that loving contact that all of us want. The thing to remember is when you're in a relationship with someone, our partners or our spouses or boyfriends or girlfriends are really the people in our life that we turn to shelter us. When this person's not available or is not responding to us, we get filled with so many emotions. Susan Johnson, who is one of the founders of the emotionally focused therapy model, called these, and I think very appropriately, a tsunami of emotions that happen. There's this flooding of emotions that occur that can really overwhelm us. And these emotions that typically come are either feelings of sadness, anger, hurt, and more importantly, and I think more frequently, it's fear. What this fear is about and what we're afraid of is that no one's going to be there for us. We all need someone that we know that we can rely on. and know that he or she is going to respond to us and more completely than anyone else in our world and anyone else in our life. When we sense that that primary love relationship or that person that we're in a relationship with is possibly not there, we feel so threatened. We go into what they call a primal panic state. And when you do that, when you're in this primal panic state, you do and act in ways that you can't even imagine. And at times we remember back after an argument is over or conflict is resolved and you say, who was I? How in the world did I do those things and say those things to my partner? And there's a lack of understanding. And I think until we really understand and our partner understands how important we are to them, this panic comes off in such unhealthy ways that it can create such tension and anxiety between people that at times seems unresolvable, but it all is. When this panic state is occurring for couples, what basically there are is 3 different ways different kinds of couples respond to these situations. If, as a couple, you're in basically a happy, secure relationship, what happens is you accept that there needs to be some sort of reconnection and repair, and you begin to talk about what you need from each other that will help you feel better and feel close again. If, though, you're not in a very good relationship and it seems pretty fragile and wobbly, what happens for these couples is there's an insecurity that happens in which you're not quite sure how to voice those needs. And what we do, and we all do this if you're in these kinds of relationships, is that you begin to angrily demand and push our partners into responding to us in any way that we know how. The problem is, quite often, those tend to shut our partners down and push them away. And we move away from that to try to be self-protective and to protect yourself emotionally. No matter what words that we use, what we're really saying to our partners is, please look at me, see me, notice that I'm here, and notice that I need you. Or the other part of that becomes, I won't let you hurt me no matter what. If you are such an angry person, you don't matter. I'm going to stay away so I can stay in control. That effort at trying to stay emotionally centered and in control sends our partners the message that we don't care about them. What happens for a lot of couples, though, is that when they try to do this and the strategies don't really work, they get stuck. And we all do this, and it all happens to the best of us. And this is not a shortcoming to you or your relationship, but you get stuck into these interactional patterns or cycles in the relationship that Susan Johnson calls demon dialogues. What these are the patterns or cycles that can literally take over a relationship. They create more resentment, more caution, and above all, more distance between the two of you until it reaches the point where you feel like there's no other recourse but either shutting down completely or bailing out of the relationship. So what we need to be able to do is identify what type of cycles or interaction pattern you and your partner are caught up into. The more you do that, the more you're able to then begin to work together and find a solution to this. There really are 3 main demon dialogues. And one of the things that I am currently doing is I'm doing a video, YouTube video series on the 3 demon dialogues. So I'm not going to talk a lot about those right here. But what I'm going to just do is identify that there are 3 different kinds. One is find the bad guy. And as you might imagine, that's like looking to see who is at fault. You know, it's a fault-finding, blaming cycle. The other is called and what happens for a lot of couples is when you get caught up into looking for the bad guy, it really leads to you getting stuck into what Susan Johnson calls the protest polka. The protest polka is a demand-withdraw interaction, and quite often that's the one that will lead to divorce. What happens is we get caught up into this need to be critical and criticizing and shutting our partners out to be emotionally protective. So what happens is you can't just switch off this desire to be close and your longing for your partner. So what you end up doing is shutting your partner out because you're sure that you are not important to them and that you feel this primal panic need to get some sort of response to validate that you matter. And when you do that, you shut your partner out, and your partner then will pull away and shut down. And so often I have couples who have come into my office who are saying, I'm just cut off from this person because she doesn't or he doesn't understand how important they are to me and that I really need to feel close and significant. But what happens in the end of this push and pull that occurs is you turn into a really cold freeze and flee pattern, and that one there's very little return from. So one of the conversations that we're going to talk about with the Hold Me Tight workshop is going to be the first conversation, which would be the conversation one, which is about identifying your particular demon dialogue. And I'm going to talk a lot about that as I talk about the workshop, which is the next section that I'd like to sort of talk about, which is what happens at these workshops. What Hold Me Tight does is it focuses on creating and strengthening that bond that each of us had with our partners at one point, or we wouldn't have been in the relationship in the first place. But because of some of the interactions that have created a great deal of difficulties for couples, there is a breakdown in that emotional bond. So what the Hold Me Tight materials in each conversation does is it strengthens that bond between the two of you by identifying and finding those moments in your relationship that can foster the relationship being open and that the two of you once again can be in tune and, more importantly here, responsive to one another. What we truly know now is that conflicts and the arguments and fights that just drive us crazy are really our own protest over an emotional disconnection. What we want is to feel close to our partners. What we do is we long for that connection. And the more negative the interactions become, the more panicked we get that we're not going to have a connection with our partners. What happens is because of that, conflicts increase in our efforts to try to rebuild that loving feeling and feeling of being close and important to our partners. So what we then have to do is to help couples have the right kind of conversations, to begin to identify 7 key conversations that can then turn a relationship from feeling so distressed and empty into feeling so fulfilled by your partners and knowing how important you are. And it develops into this relationship that both people begin to identify as a lasting, secure relationship. Once you identify your relationship that way, it can really feel like it's going to last a lifetime. And there's nothing more important and fulfilling than that. So what we then begin to do is help couples have 7 unique conversations. I'm going to go through each one briefly just to give you a sense of that. And then we can next time, I'm going to bring on Diana Weiss Wisdom, who she and I are going to have a conversation talking about the power of these in real life groups. I talked a little bit about the first conversation, which is recognizing the demon dialogues. What this conversation really does is it helps couples to really see their negative interactions. And when you can really visualize it and see it and talk about it, couples begin to recognize. And the more exciting time for me as a therapist is when couples begin to say, you know what, I finally see that it's not him or it's not her that's the problem. It's our cycle that's the problem. And what both of us do in this negative pattern, and that's the enemy. Once the two of you can really see the enemy as your cycle and not each other, you can then begin to work together and begin to share those deep emotions and those deep longings that you've been missing for so long. Once that has happened, what we do is we then go into a second conversation. This conversation can often be one of the more painful ones because it's really finding the raw spots. What you need to do is begin to look beyond your immediate reaction to each other and begin to get in touch with your softer, deeper emotions, those emotions that long for one another. The raw spots develops when we talk about a person's attachment needs and when your needs to feel close or to feel connected or safe or secure in a relationship, when those needs have been neglected or missing, the person feels so emotionally deprived and deserted. I was talking with a woman today regarding her relationship with her father, and her mother and father had a deep-rooted difficulty for many years that ultimately led to have her mom have an affair. One of the things that we talked about was that she has this deep-needed, rooted feeling of wanting to have a relationship with a man that is so secure and stable that it's not the up and down roller coaster ride that she experienced as a child. And that when the conflicts that come up with her boyfriend currently trigger those feelings of being insecure and never knowing whether or not you can count on your partner, that really was an awareness for her. And then the two of them began to talk about in conversation number 2, about how to make her feel more secure with the two of them. And if we can do that, and if she and he can really have that dialogue and talk about those things, then she's going to feel so loved by him because she begins to recognize that he's made her needs so important to him and he wants to be right there with her. The third conversation is revisiting a rocky moment. And what that conversation is about is we have couples who have had difficult times and have attempted to deal with some of the arguments that they've had in the past. And once they've sort of recognized their demon dialogue, they then begin to acknowledge each other. And what they do is they revisit a moment in their relationship that did not go well. This is a very scary time for most of the couples that come through the workshops because they recognize that they're opening up something that never got resolved. So what we want to do during this conversation is we want to stop the demon dialogue from happening. And this is also the time, or even previously, where it's helpful if the couple has named their demon dialogue. And as a couple, you get to do that. You can name your demon dialogue so that when this is happening, there needs to be some warning that you give each other and say, one couple, for example, called their demon dialogue the hurricane. So what we do is have the couple say, uh-oh, the hurricane's coming. So they stop the demon dialogue. And then each partner begins to identify what their move in the cycle is. And they begin to claim their own feelings about it. And how you, as a partner, then trigger your partner and shape your other partner's feelings. And you ask your partner about their deeper emotions, and you share your deeper emotions and these softer emotions. And then you stand together with that. And if you can do that, and not all couples are ready for this when they come in through the workshop, and each couple is going to be able to go through each conversation differently, depending on the stage you are in your connection, begins to really help each other identify and work together. And then we can move on to the fourth conversation, which is such a beautiful one. The fourth conversation is what we call the hold me tight conversation. This is the one that really can change a relationship. It's a conversation that begins to have each partner being more accessible to one another and emotionally responsive. And you really begin to feel your partner's presence in your life and knowing how important you are to them. You begin to generate the positive patterns that we can actually reach for our partners and know that if we reach for them, they're going to respond to us because there's such a deeper understanding of our needs and wants and a real awareness that your partner is there for you. There's really two parts of this conversation. The first part is going to be allowing yourself to really get in touch with those emotions and also feeling them. This can be a really difficult and overwhelming part because some people have never before this really looked inside deeply and begin to really identify their longings. Once you've identified that and experienced the deep emotion that comes along with that, the harder part is part two, which is to then share those needs with your partner and believe that their partner is going to really be there for you, and you begin to ask your partner for what you need. This is one of those parts that quite often couples struggle with, and sometimes they're not really ready for the emotional responsiveness and really talking in this way to one another. So at the workshops, what we do is we try to really guide couples to have these emotional responses. And what's so exciting, and we'll talk a lot more about this also next time, is how couples really who have gone through all the previous conversations really find themselves, for the most part, able to do this. Some couples actually report that it's one of the first experiences that they've had with one another where they really feel their partner is present with them and really tuned in to their deep-rooted emotions. And it's so fulfilling as a counselor to really be there watching couples, and it's not uncommon for the therapists and the clients to really become emotional at those times, to tune in to our partner's deeper emotions and needs and longings and transform them into a clear signal to one another that you really are there for them. We have to recognize that the code of attachment that we all have, the need to belong and to feel safe and to feel secure, and rather than dismiss it and say, it's poo-poo, it's unnecessary, be an adult, grow up, take care of your own, you need to really be able to do this on your own. If we can really get soft with our partners and share that we too have those needs and not dismiss it, then you too can have a love that is so unique and wonderful, and the two of you will feel so secure in each other's love. That's the hold me tight conversation. Okay, after that, we move on. After people are able to sort of practice that, and some couples able to experience that, we move on to the next conversation. Conversation 5 in the series is about forgiving injuries. There are many couples who go through our workshops that don't get to do this effectively because they're not ready. And I want to be clear about that. But I think what's important is that the two of you begin to talk about forgiving the injuries in the relationship. What happens for a lot of couples is, for many different reasons, our partners feel betrayed or abandoned by us. There are so many couples that come through these workshops that have unresolved injuries that we need to really begin to talk about forgiveness. And forgiveness is essential to moving forward and really getting through the next stage. Partners need to have a healing conversation that's different than what they've done before. It's not just about saying, I'm sorry. It's not just about saying, oh, I won't do that again. It's really be able to share with our partners how important they are to us, and that we recognize that there have been injuries that everyone have, and that you recognize that you were not really present for your partner, and you really want to be from this day forward. And there needs to be, and this is also the hard part, a willingness for both people to begin to trust again and recognize how important you are. Conversation 6, which is one that a lot of couples are not ready for, which is a conversation regarding bonding through sex and touch. We need to have a conversation about sex and touch being a powerful bonding experience, and that loving your partner is about also expressing your love in physical ways as well as mental ways. And when people don't feel emotionally safe to one another, sex becomes really difficult. And we talk a lot in the workshops about how to have your sexuality be something that is a bonding, bringing together experience, and a sharing about your emotional connection and not just a physical act. The last conversation that we have is about keeping your love alive. And that's the conversation that's really a wonderful one for couples that are able to go through all of these. And I don't really want to talk much further about that conversation, because what I'd really like to do is next time, when Dr. Diana Weiss Wisdom is with us, we're going to talk a lot about these conversations and how people move through them at different paces, at different ways, but everybody who goes through this and who has participated in these workshops walk away feeling so much better about each other, and so much and so more in love with each other, that these experiences really become life-changing for a lot of people. So I wish you all a good night. I wish you all love and connection with your partners. Be good to one another, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to today's episode with your host, Stuart Fensterheim. You're one step closer to reigniting that fiery passion with your partner. For more information and your 30-minute free phone consultation with Stuart, visit www.thecouplesexpertscottsdale.com. We'll see you next time.